Hello and welcome to another episode of The Value of Everything. Now, just have been to a railway museum and it's given me a few thoughts on a little subject which I think does require an awful lot of exploration. So, when we have a big project that comes forth, we have something called like a railway project or a space project. Things like that. It's amazing to think of how these come together and how they're structured, and how it would even be conceived or contrived without any kind of form of central planning. Now this obviously doesn't tie into a complete libertarian's ideal, but we have to explore all possibilities so that we can get a clear idea of what's the best potential model for us. Now, in terms of century planning, century planning is obviously just a certain sort of sense of management. So, in theory, you'd have the best managers who are the most organized, who can get the best out of resources to provide the best service. So maybe they're not the best skillsmen on being on the ground, but they, in theory, should know how to construct and organize and put things together. Now, over time, we find that, well, obviously in a lot of management styles and a lot of management systems, we have an amazing array of talented managers who can put forward their ideas for their company. But I would say the best type of managers are the most inventing kind of managers, and the ones that want to come up with the big ideas and push forward a company to be at the forefront of design and creativity. And also efficiency and all those measures. I guess you do get businesses which have managers which come in and try and cost save, which is like the archetype kind of manager nowadays, where you have corporations and shareholders wanting the most efficient business possible method, maybe potentially not taking too many risks and ensuring that the share price increases in value, so that when it's sold on or the manager moves in a very short-term light, that they can make turn around the quickest profits possible. However, the corporation doesn't necessarily tie in quite nicely with long-term design and improvements to products. So yeah, so I think that's where I sort of highlight a good manager. Now, a good manager, generally, I'm gonna make some very wild statements here. A manager, I find, is usually the best ones are the ones that have worked throughout the chain of command, know all the structures from the bottom, from the ground up. So he's got a very good, complete overview of how the system works. And then from that perspective, from a customer's perspective, from just your general menial tasks, and then working your way all the way up to senior management, that kind of manager usually can put forward the best ideas. So I need to branch this into centrally planning. Now, obviously, the very first centrally planning sort of idea you're going to come into your head is the politician, because the politician is voted in by the voting general public, but slightly funded by the corporations. Well, funded basically by the corporations, and he has a mandate to fulfill the corporation. I mean, obviously, in a little bit of it, he can't necessarily fully meet them, but he can slip in a few things here and there and put forward some regulations for the corporation. So, majority of all like the corporate laws can be passed for the corporation, and then in the meantime, put forward certain popular voting sort of schemes. If the politician's very good, maybe he's got a little bit of foresight for the future, he might be able to do things like control the budget, but again, it doesn't really help him getting voted for the future. So the problem with centrally planning, potentially, especially for a politician, is that we've got a couple of issues. Number one is that usually a politician hasn't been really affected by a lot of the regulations for businesses, hasn't been affected by the welfare state, hasn't been affected by a lot of government schemes, hasn't been affected by the wars inflicted. The politician would be very untouched by all of those effects of government, yet the politician would be fully in control of that. So when it comes from a centrally planning perspective, the politician would in general have the least of a sense of how to approach certain problem areas. The next issue that lies is because a politician is, and this is the old classic one, if a politician is in term for 4 years, he's got the same thing as a CEO who's in charge of a corporation. He has to turn around a nice tidy profit or a happy voter is his main thing in a short amount of time, and not be as concerned. I mean, obviously they can be fairly concerned, but not be as concerned of the future, because he's not going to be in power for any term longer than maybe 8 years. So then if you've got a mandate to complete for 8 years and you want to be as successful as you can, and you want to put through all the different regulations and maybe do a few changes, and maybe you want to do some good, then you've only got 8 years to do that in, and you are going to borrow and promise your way through the voters until you can get your 8-year term. So you actually do 4 years, and then you get another term, and then you get another 4 years. Yeah, something like that. I mean, it could be 10 years. I guess different countries have different rules and regulations. So, yeah, we have something called centrally planning and management and things like that, which is very... You cannot like control anything without some kind of system of management, from a fire station to an energy like a coal power station. All those kind of things would need some kind of centrally managed system in place so that they can allocate the resources correctly and in the right fashion. So yeah, we have this little crossover of centrally planning and how we perceive it as a very good thing, of a very good potential, but on the other hand, we've got some kind of legitimate problems with it as well. Another thing with centrally planning, particularly when it comes to a politician, and particularly when it comes to a politician in a particular market field. So let's go to the trains. and this is very, very relevant to places like China. If you do not have quite the full understandings of the market, and you're a politician who puts forward a number of different changes, I guess you can be a minister of a certain department and have a certain degree of experience in that fact, but there's no way that you would be a doctor and then work your way up to well, I guess you can, but it's very rare that you would have a full doctor being in charge of the healthcare system. I imagine if you've got previous doctors in charge of the healthcare system, maybe they're a better manager. They've got a better idea, as would other people. But they might be stuck in certain dogmas. They might be a little bit in tune with how to wrangle the system and how to please the certain people. So it's not necessarily, especially when you go to a non-business orientated profession. Well, I guess obviously being a doctor is still a business, but you still have to, it's a little bit more government-ish funded and insurance funded, and it's more focused upon the patient. There's a little less of an idea of how the business element of things works. So going back to China, we have a politician who's in charge. Now, he might have a fair experience of trains and infrastructure. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's just been put in charge. He's got a hell of a lot of charisma going back behind him. And he's got this fantastic plan where he's going to link one major city to another in a big funded railway system. Now, seeing that we have this big funded railway system, there is potentially voters' demand for that to happen. So then there's a certain program that's been put in place for that. But because there's certain rules and regulations, only the government can put it forward, because they've got the best idea for the future of the people, and they can forward plan the best resources to provide for the future. So they can use the taxpayers' money as collateral and put that forward as and obviously gain a load of debt and pay for the production of this infrastructure, which could be this major railway line from one city to another. Now, seeing that we've got this this change. Now, the problem that we have here is that we've got a politician that's got potentially no real good understanding of the business venture that is going forward with that idea. Maybe, I guess there's obviously number crunching that goes on, and how quickly can we turn this into a profit over this time, and how much, and all of those numbers and factors. But for one thing, you are crushing the free market, because basically you're using the government's force to put forward its own railway line, where you could have had a private railway line that could have been produced. But taxpayers' monies are paying other companies to do this, and who knows who's privileged enough to be in charge of that company. If it's all privately run businesses, there could be certain payments that could be done for favours for favours, especially in a political power position. Now, obviously, for a politician, it's incorrect to take bribes and be corrupted, but we know this happens because it's been found out in the news a number of times. So there is that corruptible point, and so we have potentially a system which has been put in place, maybe not on the correct means of what it should be, and potentially a lot more expensive than what it should be as well. And this has been voted by the public, and it's been run at a debt which the public probably cannot afford in the first place. You do say, okay, well, the forward planning can perceive that you can now get this railway line from one city to another. That means that you've got better work capacity, you've got a better, you can put more workers into one city, and that can just generate more of the GDP in the future and things like that. But you have instructed potentially a lot of inefficient things into the market. You're putting a politician that may not have any experience in terms of how the railway infrastructure should be run, whereby in general in the past you would have a very rich man who would start off very small but start slowly building railways and continue on from that point and know how to run the most efficient railways and put the railways in the correct places where he can maximize revenue return. And also by putting those railways in place, he would always be seeking the cheapest costs possible, and therefore always giving the best certain value in return to the customer in form of its tickets. Whereas we've got this very convoluted, well, it's just this this out of touch feeling with the politician, where he's put forward this infrastructure plan and we've paid for it, and they look so efficient by putting forward this big railway, but it's all just cleared into a load of debt, which we don't quite realise and quite understand, but it's going to hit us at some point in the future, which we just keep on knocking on. And there is that sort of disconnect. So yeah, we have definitely a sorry about that. Yeah, so we definitely have benefits of centrally planning, but where we have centrally planning for politicians, there's a lot of big question marks about expertise, about how attuned they are for planning in the future, how they obviously can be corruptible. And how they can, and how the actual true costs of making things are blended into the future that we can't quite perceive and don't quite get an idea of. And then obviously all the risk factors, if things come into more expense and the build time goes on for longer, where you've got somebody who's got some skin in the ring, just another politician comes in charge and just hasn't got his, like, basically his balls in the vice and trying to push on the project as quickly as possible. He's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I've got to do this as much as I can, and then I'll move on to this next position, or maybe I can be a minister of another department. So we've created systems of corporations which doesn't give quite as much responsibility, and then we've created positions of politicians which don't give them quite as much responsibility. Therefore, if you have a real privateer involved who's taking on all the risk and is putting that railway in place, then he is going to really push forward and make that the cheapest and most efficient product as possible, in a true centrally planning perspective. So just make sure that we realize, in terms of central planning is a great thing, especially if you've got a good rounded knowledge of all of the sort of integral parts of the build or the process. If you are long-term involved, you think of Steve Jobs. He was definitely long-term visionary. Obviously, he wanted to make an impact with his actual life by creating value for people. So pushed forward his ideas and pushed himself to the limit in that respect. But if you have that, and obviously he started from just building little computers from scratch. But if you have that sort of centrally planned man, who's the privateer, who knows how the structures run, who's got the long-term credibility to see out the project, who can maximize the efficiency and the costs, and has got safety and all of those different little products in place, then you do have true centrally planned, or just basically good managed private projects which are placed for the betterment of creating value for everybody else. Now, obviously, you could say, well, let's try and find counter arguments for a politician. So, a politician is a person of the people. So, say if there were certain things that where a privateer was in charge, he's looking to make a buck, whereas the politician is always thoughtful of a lot more than just the people that are going to use the railway. The politician should have a good idea of what the public wants, making sure the environment is well organized. If things of safety or public defense is required, then the railways can go to certain areas like a military zone or things like that, so that there's a better view of how the system could be created, and it's not all just about the creation of money, but for this for safety of people. There could be, I don't know, a fire water truck, who knows, in terms of safety, which is not being quite considered by just a pure privateer who's just looking to make money. Also, that privateer who's looking just to make money could be building railways across land and creating excess pollution and degrading the air quality and killing off wildlife and all of those arguments. So I touched into this the other day with a lot of these arguments anyway, but we need to sort of tackle both sides of the sphere. So safety has a price. Safety does have a price, and everybody has a certain price to pay when it comes to their safety. Now, obviously, in terms of us nowadays, we expect majority of the safety elements of our lives, when it comes really bad, for the government to pick up the pieces. However, if we were pure libertarians who didn't have the states to look after our back in every single term, then we would, in theory, be a lot more, well, I think it will be very practical to be a lot more safety conscious, put a lot more of our resources into safety, and there will be a certain amount of value in providing safety for certain elements. Now, if there was a central planned railway, which is, say, being done by a privateer, and then there is a insurance group which understands that if, for whatever reason, people needed to be evacuated, there was a bit of a dangerous area from this volcano, and I don't know, like there needs to be some kind of resourceful plan. There will be a cost element in trying to evacuate a certain city if certain emergencies were caused, and then in a private term, the people that will be managing the safety, maybe the insurance company or people that are just literally just safetycompany.com, whatever, then they would contact the train line and say, look, we know you're not going to be making much money because nobody's really going to be wanting to take a railway line next to this these people that live next to the volcano. However, we do need to foresee this in our cost basis for safety, and we are willing to go halves with you with just putting that railway line into that city area, and given us the extra infrastructure to evacuate the city. That's just the evacuation thing. Also, obviously, you can have these little towns which collaborate and create stratas and certain fees to be living in that area, where there's certain areas which are town planners. And then those town planners could say, okay, well, we actually might need to be connected to the grid, like the internet. We might like to be connected to the internet. Is there a way that, obviously, I know that you're not going to be returning much in the way of tickets, but there's a certain big demand from our customer base to have connection to your service. So would you like to part fund with us so that we can build this railway line to our city? So you do definitely have those elements. Just quick note, I'm going to go on to a little tangent here. So people will argue, well, if you're creating these little town planning centres, then you're creating government again. Well, the argument back to that is that the town planners would not be a central force which will have the mandate of the gun to enforce their will upon its people. They may withdraw services provided to people who do not choose to be involved with them, and then people will choose to go to another town or live in the bush, whatever they want to do. But in theory, that town planning system, and there could be multiple town planning systems which are occurring, and they could all choose to work under one umbrella, or they could get together as a consortium and then request that they can come back. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this extremely this big force of a town just get with this one man in charge, putting forward these ideas to get the railway line connected to them. And particularly when you've got different things like blockchain management, and you've got a lot more voting and democracy in terms of how your product is being produced. In that realms, maybe even just the individuals can say, okay, I would like to buy shares in this production of the railway line, and maybe in return of that, because you could manage this all on the blockchain, they get free railway for the rest of their lives, and anybody else who uses it has to pay a charge. So there could be bonds and all these different little structures that could occur directly from the people, and not even having any kind of central management involved, which can have the funding of the railway line straight to their town centre. And it could have the safety precautions involvement as well, and a number of those factors. So yeah, back to centrally planning. Now, one little documentary I watched of Hitler and how he was very successful with his Blitzkrieg. I know obviously it's not, he's not going to be shown to be the greatest person in terms of a lot of the atrocities that he did, but he was very successful in the Blitzkrieg, and I don't think there's going to be many historians to deny that. And the way that he managed this is that he chose not to be a big central planner. He chose to give all of his officers a hell of a lot of responsibility with their resources, how to manage it, how to be in control of their people, and to take risks if they choose that the risk is worth it. Not to keep on phoning up the chain of command, and just going for it. And with that, he managed to get a number of successful battle campaigns with the ability, and the actual movement of his army was so rapid because the troops on the ground could see weaknesses straight away and not have to phone up the chain of command to get a call back down, and then check whether the item was good. Sometimes things need to be done in the now and the present, and not done in this sort of thing where it comes via debate and everything like that. So there is definitely a certain amount of delegation which can occur, which does rapidly progress and improve the structure and planning of things. So we don't quite know how well things could rapidly move in terms of roads and infrastructure if it was a very privateer-run thing where people could start building their own roads across their own lands and things like that. And maybe we got environmental issues here, I guess, again, but I can cover that in other respects. So yeah, just think of how rapid expansion could be if the central of how much central planning can impede and slow down processes in terms of people going up the chain of command and returning back down with a decision. Remember, that's the delay factor, and delays can stop us from seizing the moment and taking the opportunity when potentially another rival or another company could have been in place. So when it comes to centrally planning and infrastructure changes, I know obviously it's going to be a lot more slower and a little bit more going up the chain, but again, we've got to consider that if there is a political motive behind things, and there's certain decisions that can be made on the ground, but very rarely in political structures. Usually needs to be signed off quite a way up the league of people, and then say even if you saw the planning and roads and railways minister had a plan, maybe it was just too much at the time, and it would have to go even higher to the Prime Minister or the President. And when I say that in American terms, I could say departments. And then it has to go all the way to the top, and then the man at the top has got plenty of he's got so many things that he needs to run over that he checks one thing, and then he's like, okay, no, this is not really the thing we need to do. And then it comes back down to the chain, and then there's even bigger demand, and then it comes back up to the president or the Prime Minister, and then he goes, okay, well, the demand is there now. We're going to put this forward. So that's the next argument against the centrally plan, is the speed of how decisions can be made. And when you take away and you remove responsibility from people, you stop their ability to think on the ground, think on their feet, and then potentially you've stopped a lot of managers in their tracks. Whereas a manager, where you've created somebody, you go, right, if there's anything that happens, you call this phone number, and then you phone this person, and he's going to phone another person, and then there'll be a decision eventually. Your brain's just going to switch off. You're just a relay point. You're just remember those old telephone machines where you'd click from one telephone route to the next. That's all you are. Whereas if you're said, okay, well, you're in charge. Here's all your people. Here's and here's the resources. Try and work out what's the best to do in the whatever situation's thrown at you. And I tell you what, there's probably going to be a lot more efficient management of what's the resources that are going to happen there, compared to running up and down a food chain where you're going to end up with somebody who's got not quite so much of an idea of what's happening on the ground. Now, okay, we're talking about armies here, as obviously in armies things happen in a matter of like hours or even minutes. Things can rapidly change, but you could potentially see that things could rapidly change in businesses in a free market in the matter of minutes and hours as well. Who knows? Particularly if law and order and infrastructure and shares and ownership is controlled within a blockchain structure. So now I've taken a few hits at the speed of which a centrally planned organization runs their ship. Let's say the opposite factor of that. Now, again, so we always have to talk about when we put forward these arguments of the politician and the and its angle. The politician will always, well, I guess the argument will be, the politician will know the will of the people. The politician will try and do what is demographically the best choice under all of the circumstances. So there is certain political, geographic, there's certain defense, there's safety, there's all of those different issues that need to be taken into account before a full decision is made as to whether the decision can go ahead to approve or disapprove of the creation or the enactment of this idea. Which is fairly valid. It's a good call. It's a good argument for the politician. And if I was in a politician's shoes, I would definitely be putting forward that argument. Would there be any other arguments in terms of centrally planned political ideas? Maybe the next argument would be a business. I guess you could put forward. Yeah, you could definitely put this. A business doesn't have the access to the same amount of money, and is not going to be willing to take as many risks as a government to put forward a massive centrally planned idea due to the fact of the size, the risk. You're not going to find many companies that are going to be willing to put forward this idea and carry it out to the end and all those kind of things. Now, very first argument against that would be, well, maybe the reason why they don't put forward that they don't put forward that plan is because they don't see any profit behind it. So that it's not unprofitable for them to put forward a business proposition which could end up in failure. So you could have a total misallocation of resources whereby we might be just ploughing all our money into a road when we could have had a very efficient railway system instead, or we could have had a very good airport instead. Who knows the best allocation of resources at that time in place? And if a business hasn't really foreseen to do that, then why would a large government think that there'll be a better choice in place? Now, obviously, you could say, and this is another against the politician, is that there's certain rules and regulations of putting railway across certain land. Government usually owns the majority of the land of the state anyway, so it's impossible. It's quite, well, not impossible, but it's very tricky for a private company to start building across government land unless there is a certain level of cooperation or backhanders or corruption, which may occur just to ensure that they can be the privateer that builds the infrastructure for them. So yeah, so it's very tricky in that respect. Next up, in terms of essentially planning again. So I'm going to try and keep on fighting for the government. Let's see how we can get on with this. If I was a politician, I would say, so obviously I would say the holistic approach. I would put forward arguments in terms of environment as well. I mean, we have to explore the environmental factors of building over land and things like that. And you could say that somebody who builds just railways do not have the expertise. They do not have the expertise to look into the environmental factors of what they're doing and creating, and they do not have the expertise in the geographical areas, the land. Well, I guess they probably would need to do that for a business sense of building and stuff like that. But they're not going to necessarily be an expert in how the environment is affected, because they're more so attuned to how to create a good railway, which is very profitable. So yeah, the government's going to come back and say, look, you don't know what effects are you're going to do to the ecological system. We have got a ministry for the actual environment itself. We've got the expertise. We can centrally manage it, and we can ensure that there's the least amount of harm which can be happening to the environment, by which just a general privateer railwayman or roadman could create a disastrous impact and could wipe out a number of species in its one-dimensioned approach for profits. Right, so I have to argument that. Now, how do we know for sure that if we were building a road and there was a humongous environmental factor that was being put into place there, and it could have a severe impact on the business, so you have ethical reasons as to why you wouldn't build over a certain place, then you would avoid it. I think that's a general gist. I guess you have to imply things, but if there is a certain negative profit motive of you building across certain lands, you definitely would not do that. And when, I guess, if you are building over infrastructure and things like that, you would have to speak to the people that own those certain points of land and then get an idea of what is going on. I guess if you're a half decent builder as well, you would get some kind of environment report or environment insurance that would ensure, because I'm sure you would have a lot of mitigation claims to ensure that you minimize the amount of mitigation claims that are occurring. And if you had a certain certain industries which were protecting certain species, and potentially even having lawyers or people that were in protection of certain species, I might need to explore that one a little bit better. But say if I created a fund or a Bitcoin fund that protected the duck-billed platypus, I would ensure that I would be paying to that certain charity that if its environment was under threat, that certain mitigations could be put forward against any companies that were trying to destruct its environment. So, again, by the pure profit motive of the railway company, the railway company would most likely pay for a... I mean, obviously, he's got the involuntary choice of just going straight through the duck-billed platypus's environment, but in general, his profit motive would to be ensure that he destroys the least amount of the environment, so that it would put him under the least amount of claims. Now remember, so when wildlife species in nowadays environment, we've got to think of them in just like they're only really protected by the government, and the government really, I mean, are they going to be as really as protective as people that are putting forward into some kind of fund to actually protect that animal? I would say not so, because a government will be... let's put forward this idea. You can always counter-argument. A government's first priority is its own survival. Now, I could be wrong, I could be right, but I would say that the government's first priority is to stay in power and to be in power for as long as they can. The next priority would be for a government is to ensure that they can keep their party power in place by keeping the funding by the corporations. I would say that's the next one. And then I would say the third one would be to appease the voters. And then you've got like maybe improve the country's different states, like the military and things like that, and if they can make a good buck at the time. And then probably last on the list is to really make a seismic reduction of not the deficit but the actual debt itself. But yeah, there's the actual priorities there anyway. Now we're coming back to central planning. So yeah, welfare of species. You could say the government will have some good counter arguments against you on that, but we don't really know the actual state of play of real protected species by voluntary private funds who might even have a collection of lawyers trying to protect these species of animals, or might have an umbrella of different things so that if certain environmental factors are occurring, then these species are getting protected. This is just one theory. We could potentially have a number of different theories which can occur, but I do think there is a lot of answers which can be found within the blockchain in a very free market legal terms. And protect protect a number of different factors. So next we have, what do we have from a central planning place? Let me go back into the politician's shoes. Let me see if I can pull any other little tricks out of the bag. If everything goes wrong, politicians got emergency measures. Politician can pull out something else out of the bag. So I've just sort of pulled myself into that position anyway. So say if something goes wrong, it can pull in its military. It can pull in the fire brigade. It can pull in all these different elements in case of an emergency which is caused to come up and sweep out the pieces if it manages to detonate a load of gas that it was drilling underneath or something, whatever it's happened. There's some kind of ecological disaster, massive explosion by I don't know, drilling, or we had to drill underground tunnel or something like that, and for the railway, and that created a massive explosion. Well, and there's loads of people that have been injured, and it's creating other fires, and it's engulfing a city, whatever. Well, yeah, so you got the government that can kick in, and the state comes in. It comes in with the military. You got the army, the feet on the ground. You got the ambulances. You got all of that infrastructure that can kick in and start saving lives. And if there's any problems that are totally unforeseen, then the government can come in and save the day. All right, so. Firstly, if a privateer doesn't have that kind of power behind it to save the day, if it does get itself into any problems like that, well, it would start to probably pay for insurance. Because if it did find itself in that spot, that business has failed within the second of it drilling into that hole and an explosion happening. So any company that was trying to build this railway with no insurance is on this plan for destruction. This path of destruction, which will decimate it itself. Now, even if you did have this business that was just on the last roll of the dice, it just had to complete this. It had no money for its own insurance, and all of those factors. Then, if the a massive problem happened, then you would still have insurance protecting people in a private sense that will get people out of that problem. It's not necessarily like it would be their fault that that privateer company would do that. There would be obviously more prevention rather than cure. There would be the blockchain understanding or seeing independently that this company is running without insurance, so nobody can really claim against them for doing this business. So then certain insurance companies or a certain amount of degree of force would say, look, you're building without insurance on this land and there's no protection of these other people. So in self-defense of these people which are put at risk of you building this railway, we need to prevent you from continuing any further until you can find the funds or somebody pays for your insurance to continue to build. If not, we will have to send in certain security people to prevent you from continuing on with this build. I think I cracked it there with that argument, but if you can counter argument with me, I will keep on going with that. That's fine. All right, so yeah, so we've covered the uninsured despot privateer. Now, or just a entrepreneur or businessman or whatever you want to call him. Government, what can you do? So all right, I've got another argument. The government has a certain form of identity. It knows how to incorporate its certain signature, like looks, and it can, with being a centrally planned government, it can put past regulations to ensure all the signages on the road are met with all the other signages on the road, and there isn't this like colourful flurry of different signs. So when we drive into a different road, we're like, what the hell are we going to do now? I don't know how to cross this road because I've got this giant green jelly man that's doing a backflip in the air rather than being on a little board. So why on earth have I gone into this crazy little land which have got all these weird little road signs? Now, look, whoever's been to a different country before generally knows that even with these different countries which have built different road signs, can pretty much get around and drive without having to read every signal from the highway code to drive around. So there's certain levels of universals which occur, and I'm sure there will be some kind of unique identity between one road to another if it's owned by a certain person to another person, as there would be with a different house to a different house. But in general, people would understand in terms of safety that a unifying signal code of safety would be far more valuable than to have some crazy loopy signs for each place that you go to. So there's the profit motive. The insurance company will say, well, I'm happy to insure the road that you've built, but you've got to sort out those signs. Those signs just don't make any sense, and you've got to improve these things because you're going to get a lot more traffic accidents, and I can't accept you having these crackpot signs on this road, which is going to get more traffic accidents, and I'm going to cost my customers more insurance premiums for you to drive down this road as well. So they're not going to be happy themselves. So get your signage worked out, try and work with the other companies and get some kind of unifying system worked out. If you think of like the internet, I mean, obviously a lot of web pages are very different, but you can get a top title bar which goes on in a horizontal line, and you can get a left-sided margin column bar line, which pretty much does most of your online shopping websites. I think everyone's pretty much ruled into that sort of scheme. I guess you get some very creative ones where you can press buttons and you can look at products and all that kind of stuff. But your row and your column on the top and your left-hand side is pretty much how a uniform style of navigation has been created for us on the internet, and that's a very newly let's say the last 20 years has been created, and people were fairly happy with that system. They know you very rarely get onto a website where you pay for something and you're like, what the hell am I doing here? I've got to navigate myself around here, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. So yeah, just think of it in those kind of terms. It's not that crazy, and we can find a way to unify signs and signals without having to use the government state enforced to ensure that we are all on the same page. There is a certain profit motive to being unified, particularly when it comes to safety, but also there's a profit motive to be unique as well. If you're unique to another road in terms of beauty, maybe you decide to put loads of flowers on the side of the road, whatever you do, then there's a certain uniqueness, but the uniqueness is beauty, then there will be a definite advantage and a nice colourful road to drive down in that respect. But when it comes to the safety, you're going to notice, oh, well, I've crossed over from nice roads business to fast roads, and still I've got pretty much the same signs which are occurring. They're really inventive business ideas anyway, business names anyway, but but yeah, yeah, maybe fast roads is probably not quite the way they want to go. I guess you want to get to places fast, but safety is the issue sometimes, isn't it? Maybe safe roads is a better word. So yeah. So there's unification, there's a little bit of speed where you're delegating power to people on the ground. There's a definite efficiency that's going to be happening. There's no concern about how the money's going to be wasted. There's a lot of factors which are coming into play when there's a centrally planned system that's occurring. Maybe you could argue against me here and there, and you could say maybe the space program, there wasn't any profit motive in there, but yet we got up there and we found some great inventions on the way, which without those inventions wouldn't have created all of those other things. But then you've got counter arguments to say, well, all these amazing minds, amazing engineers could, instead of being created to go into the space program, could have built us some fantastic flying cars. I don't know. Like we're arguing into certain ideas, but whoever knows what those minds could have created instead of the NASA programs, we don't quite know. Maybe you could say that there's a certain element of putting great minds together that wouldn't normally been put together. You always sort of think about that, where scientists get to put together for creation of atom bombs for war things and war situations, maybe in the idea of safety, but I still think that in certain ideas of safety, great minds and great businesses can come together and still work in a cooperative manner to solve major problems and be highly efficient at doing that at the same time. So yeah, there's a number of things I've thrown at you with the central planning. If you feel like I haven't really defended the political side that well, I probably haven't to the best degree. I know I'm a little bit leaning on the free market side, but if you can push forward with some fantastic counter arguments, I am very welcome. If you can still support the free market, then that is also welcome as well. We'll keep the debate going on in those terms. Maybe you think that there's a legitimacy in part private, part government. That's sort of what's happens now anyway. But you could give me some good arguments in that respect. But yeah, just do not hesitate to put forward anything you choose may benefit us in the future, in the idea sphere. And yeah, the best form of central planning is always going to be what you do with yourself. You are the center of the world in your terms. So think of how you manage your life, how you manage your things, and think of how when other people manage your shit, how you don't quite like it, and see how we can, make this world a better place. Thank you very much for your time, and we shall do this again sometime soon.